So now let's summarize what is direct query and import and how different they are from each other. So if you see, if you do an import up to 10 GB of your complete PBIX files, okay, is allowed in your login in the Power BI Service Cloud. Whereas direct query, there is no limitation, because if you look at it, practically there is no data on the file. Therefore, Power BI service cannot have any restrictions on it. Therefore, there is no limitation on it. What is a data source? If you do an import, you can actually import it from multiple data sources like we saw. And here, if you do a direct query, you can query only singular table. If you look at it, you cannot have more than different kinds of data coming from a single direct query. Then data change in the underlying data performance. If you see, import is much closer to the visualization, therefore the performance is very high because the data is just residing behind the visualization. Whereas the performance of a direct query depends on the source, the network bandwidth, the internet connectivity, and the query, the data which is getting pulled, the size of the data. Everything together sums up to show some performance. So the performance is better in import, but it is not in direct query. Data change in the underlying data. If you have a master data or a database from which you have imported a piece of information on your Power BI desktop and then deployed on a Power BI service, in this case, if your underlying data in your SQL Server changes or any that kind of a database changes, in that case, it would not get reflected automatically in the Power BI desktop and the service together. You would have to probably have to import it manually or schedule a refresh based on your timings of the data. In this case, please remember, when you schedule a refresh, the database does get locked. So any other additions of data, deletions of data would reduce the speed at which they usually occur. And then direct query has caches. When you say dual data, it has caches of data for better performance. So it is necessary to refresh to ensure the latest data. A scheduled refresh, it is up to the 8 scheduled refreshes that can happen, whereas you can schedule as often as every 15 minutes. So the scheduling mechanism is awesome in direct query, whereas there is a limitation on the number of scheduled complete refreshes which is possible in the import. Power BI gateway only required to get the latest data from an on-premise data source, and for the direct query must require to get data from on-premise data source. So if you have an on-premise data source, only then you need to have this Power BI gateway. So gateway, as I said, is a tool which would help you connect your Power BI cloud with your database. Please remember, we would have a demo of gateway coming up soon. Data transformation import will permit you to do all kinds of transformation, whereas direct query would support as many data transformation with some limitations, because since the data does not reside with you on the Power BI desktop, it is expected that there would be limitations in the transformation. Data modeling, there is no limitation for any kind of modeling you would want to do. Create relationships, create more tables, add data, remove data, stuff like that in data modeling. But there are limitations in the direct query because some auto detect relationships between tables and relationships are limited to a single direction. So if you have direct query, many a times you would only have single directional data. The dual directions, like we saw in the earlier example today, may not be possible. We can ignore the size, it is getting repeated. A built-in date hierarchy so is available over here. So if you have a date column applied in your system, then you can have a hierarchy. We'll shortly have a look at this. There is any date hierarchies is not available in direct query. Then if you look at it, So now coming back to the DAX expressions, it supports all kinds of DAX expressions. You can see these DAX queries in a way, what all formulas you see in their Excel. Similarly, those are the same ones or Power Pivot thrown up in this Power BI. So all kinds of expressions and the functions are available over here. Whereas there is a restrictions on use of complex DAX functions such as time, basically time and date hierarchy, something which is used so often is not supported well in the direct query. However, if there is a date table available in the underlying source, then it supports. So there are many ifs and buts in the direct query. In terms of performance is what direct query excels in. For rest of the things, probably and performance and the size, direct query excels, whereas rest of all the properties, it is observed the tilt is towards the import. Clustering, like we saw yesterday, clustering of columns, calculating tables out of a table, quick insights, those are like who accessed what. Q&As are not available in direct query, whereas it is available in import. So Q&As are a very good feature for end business users, the key guys, to query the data by themselves by understanding certain things of the querying format, and they get their relevant answers in a graphical as well as numeric form, which is very helpful for the key guys to make their decisions. So if we don't have it in direct query, sometimes the user would ask you to import the data and change data count connectivity. So if you are on an import, it is not possible to change, as I said, to direct query. But direct query can be changed to import. It is a unidirectional change. It is an irreversible change, right? So now, if I have to tell you, pick things such as schedule refreshes, I can show it to you in Power BI like this.